As head of UK counter-terrorism policing, Neil Basu held one of the most challenging jobs in the country. The highest-ranking ethnic minority officer in Britain, he was tipped for the very top job. On his watch, 600 terrorists were convicted. Some, though, like the Manchester Arena bomber, slipped through the net. Neil Basu joined the Metropolitan Police in 1992, the year before Stephen Lawrence was murdered. Racism loomed large. This is Neil Basu's father, Pankaj, a Bengali doctor from Calcutta who married a Welshwoman, Enid. They made their home in Stafford, but life in the 1960s for a mixed-race couple was far from easy. Now the Prime Minister himself is of Indian heritage, the Home Secretary too. But racism remains, not least in the police. After Sarah Everard was murdered by a serving Metropolitan Police officer, the allegations of misogyny and racism piled up. Today, the new Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has opened a hotline for the public to report police corruption and abuse. Tonight, Neil Basu, his former deputy, speaks frankly about a force in turmoil and how his outspoken views on race saw him fall out with Downing Street. Can the new Commissioner root out racism in the Met when he doesn't accept that it is institutionally racist?
Well, I think I've known Mark Rowley a very long time. He is an incredibly bright man. He's a very good cop and he understands the problem that's facing him now.
Why can't he admit the force is institutionally racist?
Well, this isn't Mark Rowley's problem. This is National Police Chiefs Council problem. So I've been the only non-white face as a chief officer for a very long time. I don't think the Home Office cares about this subject at all. So if you were a chief constable, what would you do? You would do what the Home Office cares about and what Chiefs Council thinks is the right thing to do.
The Home Office is run by a woman of Indian heritage.
I find some of the commentary coming out of the Home Office inexplicable.
You thinking of the dream to send refugees to Rwanda, for example?
Yes.
What kind of impact did that have on you, that kind of language?
It is unbelievable to hear a succession of very powerful politicians who look like this, talking in language that my father would have remembered from 1968. It's horrific. I was born in 1968. You know, the Rivers of Blood speech happened on the constituency next to where my parents lived and made their life hell. A mixed-race couple walking through the streets in the 1960s, stoned. I was beaten.
They were stoned?
Stoned. I was beaten in the 1970s for being a mixed-race kid in an all-white school in an all-white area.
So you feel very strongly about this, partly because it's personal?
Absolutely, because it's personal. And I speak about race because I know something about race because I'm a 54-year-old mixed-race man. But when I speak, I mentor an awful lot of female, black, brown, underrepresented, some people with neurodiversity issues. This is an underrepresented issue. So when I speak about my experience and how that's made me feel and what I've had to overcome to be successful, everybody is nodding in the room.
You were in charge of royal protection. How would you characterise the threats that Meghan and Harry received?
Well, disgusting and very real. I've talked publicly for many years about the threat of extreme right-wing terrorism in this country. I've often been misquoted as taking my eye off the ball, as though I think that that was the biggest threat. I've never called it the biggest threat, but it was the fastest growing. You know, and my wonderful friend and counterpart at MI5 will tell you exactly the same thing, that when I started in CT in 2015... Counter-terrorism, it was about 6% of our total workload. Certainly when I left 15, 16 months ago, it was over 20% of our workload.
But there were many serious, credible threats against Meghan, were there, emanating from the far right in this country?
Absolutely. If you'd seen the stuff that was written and you were receiving it, the kind of rhetoric that's online, if you don't know what I know, you would feel under threat all of the time.
So you were convinced that there was a genuine threat to Meghan's life on on more than one occasion, on several occasions?
We had teams investigating it. People have been prosecuted for those threats.
You worked for many years in counter-terrorism policing. In 2017, there were terrorist attacks at the Manchester Arena, London Bridge and Westminster. When terrorists do slip through the net, What is the impact of that on you? How do you feel a sort of overwhelming sense of guilt? How do you respond?
Do I feel an overwhelming sense of guilt? Yes. My job comes with an enormous job description, let me tell you, but I can crystallise it in one sentence. Your job is to work with MI5 and stop terrorists attacking this country. And we failed to do that on multiple occasions. You know, in my time in counter-terrorism, in that year, 36 innocent people were murdered on my watch. 2 of them were police officers. That really, you know, I think about that every day. You know, I should be very proud of the 29 plots we foiled together with MI5. I should be proud of that, but I still think about all of the bereaved families, all of the victims, all of the survivors. It's incredibly hard, and it had a very profound mental and physical effect on me.
There's an official review of the Prevent Counter-Radicalisation strategy. It's been suggested that it should refocus on Islamist terrorism. I know you've defended your comments on far-right terrorism, but would that be the right approach, do you think?
I don't know what it means by refocus. To say you should focus on one at the expense of another is a very dangerous thing. And it's what we were doing before 2017 and before the Finsbury Park attack on the congregation. You know, people did not think in this country that people of far-right persuasion would commit acts of terrorism. They do. You can't suddenly be using language that says one should be more important than the other. Terrorists are terrorists.
The Met is in crisis. Did you see from the inside where and how it went wrong?
Policing is in crisis. The Met is in crisis. There is a legitimacy problem. Our performance isn't what it should be, and certainly professional standards are not what they should be. But this didn't happen overnight. This has happened over decades. So the idea that it suddenly happened on the last Commissioner's watch is wrong.
The new Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has called for more power to sack officers who aren't up to it. There needs to be a total clear-out, in your view.
I think Mark Rowley is doing precisely the right thing. There ought to be a zero tolerance for people who are prejudiced, who are corrupt, who are have the kind of backgrounds of the ones you've described, which shouldn't be anywhere near policing.
Who are criminals.
Yes.
You said it's more than a few bad apples. Clearly, the last few months have shown us that. So does it need to be a wholesale clear-out in the Met?
I'm not sure what a wholesale clear-out means. There are 46,000 people in the Met. I've worked in it for 30 years alongside thousands and thousands of people, and the vast majority of them are fantastic people.
But hundreds, if not thousands, need to go.
Yes, I think that's correct. If you're a police officer watching this, and you are, like the vast majority of police officers, a good person who wants to do the right thing, then you have to be the person who doesn't walk by when you see that kind of behaviour.
Take us back to the moment when you were told personally that Sarah Everard's killer, Wayne Couzens, had gone through Met Police vetting, had passed that vetting.
Well, I can take you to the moment when I found out that her killer was a cop. Probably the second worst moments of my career after the publication of the Macpherson report. So there have only been a handful of occasions in my entire career where I was embarrassed to say I was a police officer, and that was one of them. To think that a person who could behave like that could have existed as a police officer for so long in 2 separate organisations, I don't bring shame on all of us.
Did you yourself witness misogynist behaviour in the Met, and how did you deal with it?
Well, I've been in policing for 30 years, so it would be wrong to say that I have never witnessed incidents of racism, homophobia, misogyny, ableism now. There is a cultural problem in policing.
But you think there's something about the macho world of policing that means that actually misogynist behaviour, racist behaviour is overrepresented in the police force. It's worse than it is in society at large.
I'm not sure it is worse than it is in society. I mean, bear in mind that I had 2 careers before I became a police officer, and I'd lived 25 years as a mixed-race man in this country before that happened. But you have got to want your police to be better than wider society because of the powers that we have. And I think the way to do that is to make sure you're recruiting well, and when they're in, you are being rigorous about your professional standards. Mark Rowley is doing that. Other chief constables are doing that. We probably haven't been as rigorous enough at doing that because our eye was taken off the ball by austerity. And before that, the war against terror. But actually, professional standards is the most important thing for policing.
We're speaking now for the first time since you were turned down for the job of running the National Crime Agency when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. Do you think your outspoken remarks on race counted against you, that they saw you as woke?
So I will go with the Oxford University Dictionary definition of the word woke. I don't think that's the way it has been used or applied to me, but that definition is, are you alert to issues of racial and social justice? Yes, I am. And if that is the definition of woke, I'll wear it as a bumper sticker every day of the week. And by the way, every serving police officer, let alone a chief constable, better believe that too. We serve all of the public without fear or favour, regardless of who they look like, not just the people we like.
So did Downing Street use woke as a weapon against you? Is that what cost you the NCA job?
I'm a detective, Kathy, so I will go by evidence. I don't know that that happened, but I do know that Number 10 has previously interfered in me being appointed to positions, and the reason for that I have not been told. I would surmise, and people who know me surmise, that it is because I have been outspoken about issues that do not fit with the current political administration. They are wrong. Diversity and inclusion are two of the most important things for policing.
Neil Basu, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, Downing Street told us that a new Director General was appointed to the National Crime Agency earlier this year by the then Home Secretary, following a fair and open recruitment campaign. And the Home Office said the Home Secretary expects forces to take a zero-tolerance approach to racism within their workplace. But she is also very clear about the need to manage our borders effectively and have an asylum system that works for those in genuine need, as are the British people. We are actively pushing for a cultural change in the police, including via a targeted review of police dismissals to ensure officers who are not fit to serve can be swiftly removed.